नहीं, आप फोल्डर के साथ एक फाइल भी थी, पीपीटी के साथ एक फाइल भी है, एक वीडियो क्लिप भी है. सॉरी. मैं आऊँ? ये पीपीटी है ना, ये तो पीपीटी हो गया, इसको बंद कर देते हैं. अब मेरा डिस्क कहाँ है? ये ना. First, so this is a video. मैंने नहीं बनाया, I've not made it, but it's a standard video, and just follow the instruction, and then we'll talk. It's about 1 minute. Yeah. Okay. How many times should we pause? Should we? How many times? Again. By the way, have you seen this video?
No.
Okay.
I remember seeing this something long back.
Okay.
The monkey business illusion. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball.
How many times? I cheated, you know, I came in between. That was on purpose.
16?
16? 15? 14? एक बार और देखें?
The correct answer is 16.
16. Yes!
To spot the gorilla.
I did spot
Yes.
it.
Yes. Yes.
For people who haven't seen or heard about a video like this before, about half missed the gorilla.
Okay.
If you knew about the gorilla, you probably saw it. But did you notice the curtain changing color for the player on the black team leaving the game?
So did you spot all
Let's
three?
rewind and watch it again.
Can I miss the third one?
So the curtain changes color and the players
Now,
leaving.
Gorilla, then here goes a player, and the curtain is changing from red to gold.
Oh, I missed that.
When looking for a gorilla, you often miss other unexpected events.
अब आप पीछे लगा. Okay. So why we are talking about gorillas and ball changing hands? So I'm going to speak today and make a point about something called, that I like to call, a missed opportunity, and a missed opportunity cognizant mindset. Yeah. What you just saw, right? It's natural. It is a psychological phenomena. It's natural. It's science. And what the science says is that when you are focusing on one thing and really focusing hard, like you were here, so what happens is that you tend to miss the other things that happen. Right? Now, in some cases, the other things can be distractions, but in many cases, those other things could be relevant. And I'm here today. We are talking about women leaders and the potential that they have. So I'm here today to share with you a crisp 3-4 slides on some case studies to share and bring home the point that how there was a missed opportunity. Yes, it could have been a distraction, but when we approached it from the missed opportunities cognizant mindset, how that became an opportunity to diversify the portfolio in business terms, right? Diversify your business strategy, although these were not businesses. But in my current work now, when I consult, I do approach the problem or any assignment from that space. That is one of the things that I always have in mind. And so why I kind of wanted to all of us to actually look at this video was to see and realize it is human, but then sometimes if you are cognizant of the fact, right, that there are certain things that keep happening, and more so, I think that is very relevant, I believe so, in the social impact space. For last 20 years, I have been in the development sector. I have had full-time positions at various landscapes, right? I started with Indian Council of Medical Research. I did my PhD in nutrition. I've been in the NGO sector. I've been in the CSR. So in the for-profit, like I was saying yesterday, I've seen development. I had the opportunity to see the development sector from various lenses of a researcher, of a practitioner, of a policy advocate, and I've been really fortunate to kind of have these different perspectives. And what I realized was that whenever we are focusing on one thing, which typically social impact missions, they do, right? They are focused on one thing. But how in their landscape and in their area of focus, there are so many other opportunities for social impact, for human development, which are there, right? And how with cumulative, just incremental investments, those opportunities can be identified and can be addressed, and why, as a social development professional, I think it is very important there because there's always, our problems will always be more than the resources available, right? Always, right? So, so what I'm trying to kind of address today is, if you approach any mission from a mindset that is cognizant of the missed opportunities, and you see your mission or your program or whatever, your project, as a part of a whole, that your project lives and breathes in a part of a whole. If you're addressing education, there are these kids who are whose well-being is equally important, right? So I'm not saying that there are missions who are doing it all, but then there are missions who just focus. It is okay to have a core area, but then can you think about these and reach out, or have some primary, secondary, tertiary objectives to kind of, I'm not saying change your focus area, but just to address these missed opportunities. And the next 4 slides or 5 slides that you see is actually a proof of concept that I've culled out from my last 20 years or so of positions, that how these opportunities were identified, and they were shaped into secondary or sometimes parallel missions. So I've structured this as yeah. So this is what I say. Bhavna, could you go back to the previous slide? Focus brings success. Everybody agrees with that?
Yes.
Yeah. So next, please. So how about unfocus and defocus? I've made these words up. Defocus, definitely I've made. I don't think so. Unfocus is also a word. So, so for the next 8 minutes, I'm going to talk about how this unfocus and defocus was used, and sometimes organically, sometimes strategically, and sometimes just happened to be, but how it kind of developed into rewarding social impact programs. We'll come to this later. Next, that's me. Okay, so this is first case study. Now, this is case study of an organization called Pratham. I don't know, you must have heard of the organization. They are pioneers in education. Could you go to the next slide, please? How many of you can read this? अरे यार, तुम हो इसके अंदर, मुझे नहीं पता था. I would have picked some other language. Gujarati I would have picked. So, we will not count her in. So, anyway, by that count also, so basically, yes, it's Telugu script, but there is something called ASAR surveys, and that has revealed that children in grade 5, they are in school, and this is a survey that reaches out to 600,000 kids all across the country, right? Even if they are in grade 5, they are not, and this is grade 2 script, right? So they are not able to read it. Right, so this is the organization, and the focus is learning, and the mission is every child in school and learning well. Right, I spent about 8 years in this organization. I was in the research center called ASAR Center. I joined as a capacity building, learning and development professional, mentoring their 100+ ASAR fellows there. But the missed opportunity that we unearthed in that journey was, next slide please. Okay, so these are the Balwadi teachers. So Pratham, the first program was a preschool program, right? And it by nature, it involves local women who are trained. They live in the slums or in the rural areas, and then they are running their preschools where the local children come. So typically this program starts, obviously children start coming to the preschool when they are 3 years old. So, and above. So when we were sitting together, it was like, okay, in the same families, there are less than 3-year-old kids, and there are pregnant women, and the researcher is early years nutrition brain is telling me, and it's science, it's published, that the ROI on early years investment is so much, and nutrition can have damaging, irreparable, irreversible effects. So that was it. We identified a missed opportunity. So while these women were taking their classes, we kind of developed a capacity building, a course which we call Kiran. I will not go into the details of that. My website has these case studies. But what happened was we enriched the learning of these women, and we enriched the giving that could be given to the community. And in many cases, it was not a funded project. These were internal Pratham projects. Yes, this did shape up to become a social sector unit within Asar Center. Yes, we got grants later from Gates Foundation, we have NIH funded project. This was an RCT research project. So I think this one example holds out to me when I talk about how the missed opportunity was kind of identified, and how actually it became a resource center as well within the organization. Next. So this is the project that is NIH funded, and it is with all the top-notch researchers from across the globe, and this is early years, and these are women from Odisha who have come for the training, and I remember them yesterday in my talk. The Bolangir was one of the districts here. Yeah. Next please. Again, these are some of the, this is obviously in Rajasthan when we were kind of traveling. Next. Okay, second. Now there is a program called for skilling for out of school girls, kids who drop out in class 8 or so, to kind of bring them back in the fold through the open school system, and get them their grade 10 and have some skilling courses. And the problem there was most of the instructors were men. And we said, okay, we have a course called Kiran, and you can read about Kiran course on the website, but it's about early years nutrition and basic nutrition, you know, and the kids who have dropped out, we can offer them that. You have the faculty, you have everything. And when we were on the ground, I mean on the desk, we were thinking, oh, how will men talk about, you know, breastfeeding and stuff like that? That too in Ajmer. I'm sorry, I don't have that picture where there is this ghungat-clad women, and you know they are kind of and because there is a male facilitator, but it happened. It happened. See, this guy is so basically what we were thinking when we actually went and did, it happened, and people didn't know and valued. Again, a missed opportunity right there. All it required was an in-principle agreement, and I was there to look at the landscape from a missed opportunity cognizant mindset, right? Next, please. So this is how the program spread. And Asar Center social sector unit still exists. There are projects, they are running. When I set it up, I moved out of that because now there is a team, and I moved out to the other sectors, right? But it still exists, and it's there. This is another case study that I really, and I'm mentioning it in my book. I hope it comes out someday. I complete it someday. But this is again in down south. There was this initiative by an Acumen fellow. It's called Buzz India, and they had these orange buses. Basically, the bus would go into the village, and they would give financial literacy for bank accounts and all to rural women. And we said, okay, why not, when you have a platform, you have a bus driver, you have a projector, whatever you have, and you have women coming to you. So let's plan something like that. We designed it, and there were the pilots went so far, but not as I moved out. So anyway, so yeah. fellowships. So I've been in fellowships, 2 of them, Amex India, and the next one, could you turn to the next slide? The 4th fellowship. Now here, I think fellowships or these forums are a mighty good place to pitch this missed opportunity seed, because you have brilliant minds, and that is the reason why I'm speaking about missed opportunities here, because that's a brilliant forum and people have reflective space, you know. So I attended Amex and my assignment that I picked for my 3-week residential fellowship in New York was that I'll sit with all the mission holders, fabulous people, and work out what we can do together. Or can you do something with her, or can you do something with them, something like that, right? And in fact, MX, I was the, when I did MX, I was the first, I think that was the first cohort, but then I was invited back and we actually did a session where we put fellows together and we kind of talked about, you know, what is it that you, because then you have reflective spaces. All activists, in the development sector, we have 1,001 things, even business, you have 1,001 things to do. So I think these spaces are good spaces to reflect. So my urge is, and this is not my last slide, I have 2 more, but my urge is that after this session, if you go home, whenever you talk, if you think, okay, I'm, you know, talking to, in my whatever area I'm looking at, is there something more connected to it, and can we do more, can we look more? I'm very happy to talk about it. Next. Oh, this is the slide. The Amex, when I got back, I think it was in 2016 or something, or 18. The recent one, I'm really privileged. I also mentioned it yesterday, Arogya World. Now this organization has found, according to me, they don't call it missed opportunities, but when I spoke to them and I'm consulting with them now, I see that, and this is their slide, right? So they have found missed opportunities to address nutrition, to address lifestyle, to address diabetes, because you know, while we are still fighting with undernutrition and progressing there in some way, diabetes, NCDs, hypertension are all cropping up. All the CNNS surveys that you see, state of the world children, if you see 2019, there is tons and tons of data to say that now we are dual burden. CNNS calls it triple burden, right? So this organization has found ways where you live, in terms of, and all these programs, Maithali, M-Diabetes, where you work, and in schools, school healthy programs. So there are healthy schools and there are healthy workplaces that they have. Next. Okay, so this is the boring slide. So this is basically when I now work, and I would like to work more and more as a consultant. So whenever I work, I do have my research somewhere. I'm leading a research project, depending upon whatever skills I have and whatever skills match with the requirement. But I am guilty of bringing formally or informally in whatever assignment I approach, to just put in the seed for this thinking. It's really a thinking mindset. You might be a startup, really. You know, I was talking to these co-working people at WeWork. You might be a startup, you have 100 things to think about and your priorities. But I think at that level, if you have this mindset, you know, that kabhi na kabhi, you know, I would get to a point, at least, you know, and I remember after this talk, there was this young entrepreneur used to work with the local women, some fashion bags or something they used to make, and she was like, you know, we have a lot of attrition, women complain a lot. So I said, have you connected with their families? Can you connect? They come to you, they work in your factory, you know, can you give them some, you know, kind of some reading material? Can you do that? I can give you 100 things. You don't really have to spend tons and tons of money. So I think some thought and strategic thinking into how we can actually enrich. And I would end, I think that's my last slide, but I would end with again repeating myself that in the development sector, I think we cannot afford to let even a single missed opportunity go by us. That is why I titled the talk Missed Opportunities One Too Many, because I truly believe whichever way you have a main mission, have a secondary objective, have a tertiary objective, have some objective to do something else which is not really, or collaborate, you know, with somebody. right? So can we go back to the slide which had the quotations? I think it was the second slide, and that's my last slide now. I'm sorry I didn't juggle with the इससे पहले था? Okay, so these are few thoughts that I leave you with. If you want to hide the treasure, and many caring, these are said by people, put it in plain sight, then no one will see it. And this is how I think missed opportunities and accelerating your social impact footprint really works, you know. Sometimes you just have to, you know, just think about it. This is my favorite worm's eye view and bird's eye view. While we are focusing, it is the worm's eye view, but I think once in a while, every time, you should just see where my mission is lying in the bigger. And in my book, I'm trying to portray it diagrammatically, saying what is actually a missed opportunity cognizant mindset. And this is my favorite. I was a Ford fellow, and Henry Ford said this. And actually, when we visited their factory in Denver, the plant, we were told that the technology from textile, the conveyor belt technology from textile industry was taken, and hence the the just-in-time technology and the conveyor belt was developed. And I was thinking, okay, if Henry Ford had not seen beyond what he was focusing, or his engineers or whatever, this would not have happened. I mean, that is what I was, kind of thinking at that time. And I hope that when you leave this place and you talk to 10, 20 people, do talk about this, and I'll be very more than happy to talk to personally any one of you if you want to discuss this ever at any point of time in your missions. So thank you.
Brought back all my memories from my MBA classrooms.
Okay. Well, so I did a PhD, then a BEd, and then I realized, yeah, मैं बहुत manage करी. Then I did MBA.
There you are. Economies of scale.
Our next speaker is Gauri Bhuri.
I'm going next.
Yes.
You'll have to excuse me as I keep referring to my notes, guys.
That's okay. That's okay. I think we're all in a similar boat.
I have mine.
I have mine.
So we are all same.
I had mine well displayed on the projector. So there you go.
Just go ahead. Hi. Good morning, everyone. Excuse me if I cough in the middle. Thank you all for being here. As the head of the United World Colleges, one of the things I have to do is select students for the UWC movement worldwide. And we're looking for students that we think will be leaders tomorrow. So it's a fairly rigorous selection process. It's pan-India. We get hundreds of applications, and then we sort of whittle it down to the final 60 students that we think these will represent India globally to be people that we think, hey, these are students with the leadership skills that we think they have. Last year, I got a call from our campus in Canada from the admissions officer. And a problem that's been increasingly creeping on us in front of our eyes suddenly became so visible and so clear. And she said, Gauri, can you send us more boys? And I said, no, Fatma, we're out. Because our merit list is predominantly young girls. So we look at students who are 15, between 15 to 17 years of age. And what we've been increasingly seeing globally is our applications are fairly gender diverse and gender neutral. And as we start shortlisting, young girls seem to be emerging at the top as potential leaders for tomorrow. And it's interesting. So we've been spending a lot of time trying to think of, are there ways in which our selection is gendered? Is there an unconscious bias we have for what we're looking for? And let me tell you a little bit about our rubric and our selection criteria. So the one area, some of the areas that girls consistently do better than boys in our rubric is personal responsibility, is resilience, is motivation for UWC. So we're also looking at intellectual curiosity that we think is fairly gender neutral. We're looking at social competence, which girls seem to be doing better at than boys. And it's interesting to me because I resist theories about how some of these differences are so biological that in the way that you're born, you're naturally more caring or naturally more nurturing. I don't really, put a lot of value in that. I do think nurture mandates a lot of our behavior. And I think it's interesting how in the way that we raise our girls, they seem to become more socially competent at a much younger age. They're resilient at a much younger age. They're far more motivated at a much younger age. So as per our statistics of last year, across the United World Colleges movement, over 160 countries, 70% of potential leaders for tomorrow are women.
Wow.
I could get used to a world like that. I do think it does make us pause and reflect on what are we teaching our girls that we're not teaching our boys. It does make us think, are we expecting more out of our girls at a far younger age that we're not expecting out of our boys? Because I do think young people tend to mimic adults' behavior that they see in adults. B, when you draw on them and expect a certain behavior, they will project it and display it. And I think over time, this conditioning becomes permanent. Which isn't to say that this isn't, perhaps these are not good qualities to imbibe. But I do think it makes us think what in this is superimposed on us as women, and are there ways in which we can inculcate more of this in boys to have a more gender sort of neutral workspace tomorrow. So I think what we see in classrooms and in a lot of our community engagement projects at the United World Colleges, when we see young girls in action, I do think this is why when we think of 70% of leaders tomorrow will be women, I think that what young girls are showing increasingly is they're able to navigate emotional complexity better than boys, because I think that's expected of them. I think they're able to handle relationships better than boys. I do think there is a degree to which they're more attuned to the needs of others because they've been expected to be. Again, I don't believe that any of these things as women we're just born with. I think these are things that we have taught ourselves to do. And I think these are things that we can teach our young boys to do. And so men tomorrow do it as well. There is a higher desire for inclusivity. Girls tend to think, well, nobody should be sitting on the sidelines. They're inviting students into play. They notice if somebody isn't speaking as much. So there is a greater empathy and awareness of what's happening. We also notice that they're better at multitasking, so they're able to do this and do, kind of look at another thing. And we also find that when we say no, you can't, girls tend to think, yeah, but what if I tried this other way? So there is an open-mindedness that comes from like, okay, this path isn't working, but maybe there's a circuitous route and I can take it. And I think all of these are interesting because I think as women and women who've assumed leadership positions, I think these are all things that we've taught ourselves, we are doing on a daily basis. We are multitasking, we're navigating emotional complexity, we are defying odds. Because we have more incentive to challenge the status quo. Yeah. And I think that for us, we've recognized that the systemic inequity that exists is not based on facts. And so I think when I think of social change for tomorrow, I think that young girls have more at stake and are doing more to dismantle power dynamics that exist and perhaps are people that we need to look to for what they can become. And I think that it behooves upon us to protect our young girls and develop these leadership qualities. Because I also think that privilege can be so damaging to a young person. When you grow up believing that you're entitled to a certain, to certain access, to certain opportunities just by virtue of birth, I think the incentive that you have to push yourself to try harder is not as much as in a group that doesn't have that. I also think that in some ways it blunts their coping mechanisms because they're not up against as much as our young girls are. And this is sort of across socioeconomic spectrum. We see that in young girls that come from very economically disadvantaged backgrounds, but we also see that in girls that come from extremely privileged backgrounds, because that also comes with its own degree of things that our young girls are expected to be. So I think we tell our boys, you're being bratty. We tell our girls, that's not acceptable, right? So there is a, you know, it would be nice if you're kind. It'd be like, you must be kind. So I do think that the mandate for girls is higher, just like the mandate for women is higher. You know, recently there was a Harvard Business Review study that was looking at leadership competencies, and women across the board just, you know, surpassed with flying colors. You know, they were doing better at, again, the same things that we are seeing in young girls at 16. But what was interesting is, when women were asked to assess themselves, they didn't do as well as when their colleagues and peers were assessing them. So even when we are in positions of power, I think we're still getting used to the idea that we are in this position. I think we're all still fighting a degree of an imposter syndrome where we think, should I really even be here? Maybe XYZ would do this better, or I'm just winging it. I don't know about you, but I feel that very often, and I do
I think we still tend to give the credibility to the others or the surroundings versus taking it to our own caliber.
Yes.
I think it's kind of inculcated into ourselves.
Absolutely.
It's a big one.
And you know, if you see how men were assessing their leadership potential, they were consistently marking themselves higher than their peers were. So there was this degree of, I owe, like the world owes me this, that I have earned this.
Oh yes.
As opposed to women who feel like, wow, I'm so lucky to be given this.
Yeah.
Right? And we are
You're taught to
constantly
be modest.
got to be modest, right? And humility at what cost? And I do think, I mean, 5% of Fortune 500, you know, companies have female CEOs, and I do think how much of that is, you know, missed opportunity, like Smriti was talking about, but also women holding themselves back because they think, should I even really be here? Maybe he will do a better job. And I do think so much of this we attribute to, oh, women and child rearing, oh, women and family responsibilities. I don't think it is just that. While, of course, there's some degree of, you know, there's jobs we value and monetize and jobs we don't. And motherhood is a job that hasn't been monetized by society, well, not all societies. And I think one of the key things that we see in young women is what they see repeatedly. And if you're repeatedly seeing people who don't look like you in positions of power, what they assume is that's not my place, right? And what young boys keep seeing is people who look like them. And I think that subconscious validation that, oh, when I grow up, I want to be, who are the role models we grew up with? So over 90% of women in leadership positions say that what's really important to them is to be positive role models for their younger colleagues. And we also see that in organizations where there are women in leadership positions, that it opens doors for other women to even imagine. I also think things like what, again, we underestimate as young people are growing up. Something as simple as being able to walk on the roads and feel safe. The kind of blocks that can create in young women, where they, at any given point, why are we multitasking? Because we're also thinking, am I safe now? Am I upsetting someone? Is this person okay? So that kind of navigating that inner landscape constantly, the hurdles that can create in young people's minds by themselves, where just to make it through a regular day, you feel like, wow, I have just...
बच गए
और इतना सारा करना पड़ा, right? And how much bandwidth that leaves you to think, oh, in 5 years, where do I see myself, right? When you're thinking, oh, I'm fine with somebody walking behind me. Am I dressed appropriately? So when, again, I think the time is ripe, because I think what we have seen is the system we've been living in hasn't worked for us, you know. Our children are inheriting a world that's unstable, that's unsafe, that's becoming hotter by the day. I mean, clearly we haven't done enough, and all of us are realizing that, okay, maybe it's time to relook and reimagine everything. So I do believe that it's, even though it looks bleak sometimes when you think of numbers, I think that it's also a call to action. We're seeing more, there's a reason we see protests in the world today. There's a reason we're seeing people finally speak up and take action. People who would have otherwise rather just, you know, been on the sidelines. But I think what it's going to involve is not just about women assuming positions of leadership, but rethinking what leadership means. Is it, is it efficiency or is it inclusivity? What are our metrics for success? Is it P&L sheets? Is it employee satisfaction at work? So how do we define what it means for a person to be successful? How do we define what it means to be a leader? Is it to stand up and speak out? Is it to listen and empathize? Right? How do we expand the definition of leadership where qualities that are traditionally associated with the feminine, rightly or wrongly so, start to become things that we appreciate, valorize, and value, and make visible. And I also think the other part of that will be to make privilege more visible, where we realize that young people are not growing up from the same families, even are not growing up in similar environments. We realize that there are groups that are pushing harder and doing more, and maybe it's time for us to dismantle our understanding of everything we've known, really, and recreate a world where when we say women in leadership positions, we realize that maybe women are already assuming leadership positions, but in spaces that we don't think are as relevant. So I'd like to end with the only the cautionary note I would only say is, when we say privilege must be visible, I also include us in that, because it's important that we don't assume that all women in India have the same voice. We're a very diverse society. We're all very privileged being where we are. Generations of women started doing this work before us, which is why we can do what we do. Many of us in this room are here because we have partners who support us and believe in us and allow us the room to navigate and challenge in ways that perhaps other partners may not. And I think it's also important that as we move forward, that we're not moving, I often think of amoeba pseudopodia, like one part moves and the other part sort of follows up, and I do think some of that is happening, and we need to recognize when we think of leadership, we're also thinking of what leadership means at the grassroots, what leadership means for people from very different accents, and we take all of that into account. So when we think of United World Colleges, one of our mission is a future that's sustainable, a world that's peaceful, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And I do hope that in the way we are reimagining the world, that we take lessons from the things that haven't worked and take those as we go forward. Thank you.
You shouldn't have apologized for referring notes because you hardly referred notes.
Our next speaker is Sarita Keist.
Hi everyone. Sorry if I get a little nervous, but I'm going to try and speak throughout the notes. So, as Gauri was just talking, I'm going to take a lead from what she was mentioning to a certain extent of my thoughts here. I'm working as a director of merchandising in one of the retail organizations, and there's a lot to do with project, people, and there's a lot of women around within my own purview. But the amount of today we all have demonstrated through our work in life, we have started becoming role models for a lot of other women, as well as some young women, some young girls and boys. And the difference we make is not a small one. It's a critical one in today's environment. We serve as inspiration across countries as well as regions and generation in today's world. I feel proud and at the same time, fortunate to be able to think from our hearts and bring a difference to the workspace and environment because of our inherent nature here. We indeed can bring change because we break barriers through our emotions And this challenge this challenge has been thrown to us throughout our girlhood, which makes us more stronger, and then to be able to bring all the people together in a work environment. And as Gauri was just mentioning, and I'm going to 100% agree with her, these days work environment are being judged based on their emotional quotient versus otherwise. I think we as human beings, we're dealing with humans, not the robots over there. So all of them strive more for happiness as well as peace versus the stress which we run around the things. I think the need to be tough on the work and softer on people is getting higher and higher. And then as women, we being there, we can bring all of that quotient stronger and then bring more harmony and peace at the workplaces. And as everyone will agree, that no unhappy place is successful. No unhappy employee is going to stay forever. So that's the portion which we bring into the workspace as being women on the leadership side of it. Women leaders help bring gender equality at the top, and this benefits everyone. It benefits us. It's good for both men and women to shift stereotypical gender roles. I mean, as the status quo is holding women back from leadership roles, it's holding men back from taking caretaking and support roles. It's good for families, whether they want to rely on women or men as single bread earner. At the same time, they share the two-earner income. It's good for businesses to draw the diverse pool, and then at the same time recognize the purchasing power of women. It's good for country because the more diverse the pool is, the more talented leaders will be. And in today's world, I'm sure we all will agree here, we do need more talented leaders to come across. I think that's about it from my side specifically. I tried to be more random, but I thought that the whole emotional quotient which we bring onto the leadership side as women is what is needed in today's world. That's what I think.
Remember, you have to do an exclusive for us, right?
Oh yes. A very happy noon to all my soul sisters from across boundaries. How's the Josh?
Hi.
I didn't hear the word hi, sir.
Hi,
Okay, hi, sir is okay because it means super I remain always. Okay, the topic for today: women in leadership roles, the harbingers of change. The first word, women. W-O-M-E-N. Can I have you people pronounce it, please?
Women.
It's women.
Slower.
Women.
Much slower.
Women.
We men. Isn't it? We men. We men in leadership roles, the harbingers of change. So there are mainly two things. The first one is women in leadership roles, and the second one is the harbingers of change. Coming to the first one. The GEM, Global Entrepreneurship Monitoring Report 2016-17 reports 2,074 million women running their own businesses across 74 economies, of which 111 million of them are well established and are running really well. Recent studies indicate that women reinvest 90% of their earnings back into the health and education of their families, of their communities, of their societies at large, compared to men who reinvest only 30 to 40%. Huge gap, isn't it? That's why we make better leaders. Apart from this, coming down to our own motherland, India, as per the 6th economic census released by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, out of 58.5 million entrepreneurs in our country, 8.05 million of them are women, constituting 14% of total entrepreneurship in India. Indian women-owned business provide employment to 13.45 million people. I repeat, 13.45 million people. A 2015 study by McKinsey shows that with equal participation of women in the economy, India's GDP can rise by 16 to 60% by 2025, which means an addition of $2.9 trillion to the Indian economy. Isn't that wonderful? Women in leadership roles. Coming to the second one, the harbingers of change. To quote Xiang Wei, moderator and host CCTV News China Central Television, any society that fails to harness the energy and creativity of its women is at a huge disadvantage in the modern world, unquote. Glass ceiling to glass cliff. Women have always borne the brunt. May it be Theresa May, Marisa Mayer, Anne Mulcahy, maybe Tibara, or our own Arundhati Bhattacharya. They were all promoted to clean up the mess. How many of us have heard this? When the world is in crisis, bring in the women. When the corporate world is in crisis, bring in the women. Thanks to gender diversity or gender representation on corporate boards. Miles to go, women. Women have either been viewed as ornaments to society or property to be traded off in marriage. I have heard it myself, wherein women themselves saying, if a boy is born, it is an asset. He is an asset to the family. If a girl is born, she is a liability to the family. Heights of hysteria, isn't it? Yes. I can give you a very good example for this. Haryana experienced something called as purchased brides. Yes. Purchased brides, imagine about it. Thanks to Empower NGO, an army of 400 purchased brides are now survival leaders. They are the harbingers of change. They are out in the field, making their way in the face of adversity to square the circle of bride trafficking, helping other deprived women live a better life. Zozibini Thunzi, during her final question and answer round in Mrs. India Universe 2019 this year, was asked a beautiful question. What is the most important thing? What is the most important thing that we have to teach young girls today? She said, the most important thing that we can teach our young girls today is leadership. She says, I think we are the most powerful beings in the world, and that we should be given every opportunity. And that is what we should be teaching young girls today, to take up space. Take your space. Nothing is as important as taking up space in the society today. I have a small question for you all now. Have you all heard about women empowerment? Yes?
Yes.
How many of us have heard about men empowerment? Let us understand this word empowerment. What does it simply mean? What is the first word that comes to you when you hear the word empowerment?
Uplifting.
Uplifting?
Yes. Uplifting?
Yes. Any other?
Empowering.
Empowering. Yes. Anything else? Empower. Just the simple.
Emancipation.
Yes.
Emancipation.
Emancipation.
Support.
Support. Wonderful. Thank you for those wonderful answers. I went through this Cambridge dictionary. In simple terms, empowerment means, let me read it for you,
to encourage and support the ability to do something. Why is it required only for women?
Definitely not. It's for
Definitely not. We are Indians. Since ages we have heard stories, right? Lord Hanuman had to be empowered from Jambavant to cross the oceans to get Sanjeevani. Am I right? Is it the only example? No. Arjun, he had to be empowered by Lord Krishna to wage a war against his own blood relatives. Isn't that empowerment? All of a sudden, why women empowerment? I'm still thinking on that.
I think it's more to do with the patriarchy in the system, and if we talk about section of society, it's not just the urban population.
Yes.
But if you talk about women who
Yes.
are living in the rural areas of our country,
Yes.
I mean the kind of atrocities, the kind of challenges which that section of society also faces.
Yes.
I think that's where more of a support is required. Uplifting women everywhere.
Yes.
We don't have basic facilities, sanitization. There is so many things. You talked about gender equality. I mean, those people might not have even heard about that.
Yes.
So I think it's more to do with
Yes, and if you have to do more with that, I think creating awareness
Yes,
comes in the first place. I mean, if we don't stand up for ourselves, who else would? Isn't it? Do we require someone else to tell that we are empowered souls? No, if we don't do it for ourselves, then who else better would do it? Okay. Now coming up to the harbingers of change with a small story. 1961. A place in Maharashtra called Vidarbha. How many of you are Maharashtrians? Wow, wow. Okay, Mumbaikars? Okay, 1961, a small girl is born in Vidarbha to a Dalit family. And speaking of 60s, her father is a constable. She loves to study. She goes to school. And then what happens? People around her, her own friends, are playing with her so well, gelling with her so well, but parents, elders, stop her. Stop their own kids. Don't share food with her. Don't take anything from her. Don't sit next to her. Shockingly, even teachers were doing this to her. She was made to sit apart from the other students. She was undermined from her dreaming. How can you undermine a person from her own dreaming? She couldn't participate in any extracurricular activities. 60s, and then she comes back home. In class 7, she's pulled out of school. No surprising. And she's married off. Child marriage. She's given in marriage. Post-marriage, what a life. She's not a daughter-in-law anymore. She's that scapegoat. A kid of 12 taking up all the responsibilities of her house, right from cleaning, everything she does. And then the in-laws looking for excuses to simply beat her up, thrash her up. She was a victim of this physical, emotional abuse. 6 months down the line, the father comes to visit her. He's seeing a walking corpse. That was the plight of the girl. He takes her back home. Again, there's a walk of shame. Her marriage has failed. 60s. Imagine that she was scolded, she was rebuked, that she has brought dishonor to the family by coming back after getting married off. I am from down south. There is this Kannada saying which says, "Kotta hennu kulakke horagu." That means once a girl is given off in marriage, once the hand is given off in marriage, you're not just out of the family, you're out of the entire lineage. Imagine her plight those days, post-independence. She didn't want to be a burden on her father. She applied for jobs, for a constable post in a nursing school. But wherever she went, she was very young. Either due to lack of education or because of her age, she used to get, rejected. Somehow she could pick up some tailoring skills and she started sewing blouses, 10 a piece. She didn't know what to do. Finally, people started whispering, only if she killed herself, the dishonor that she had wrought upon her family would be expunged. What a word. She had to oblige. The last words that came to her mind as she downed poison The last words were, living is hard, dying is easy. She was rushed to the hospital when she was discovered by one of her aunts, aunts doing this, where the doctor said, 24 hours more, if she's not back, nothing can be done. Fortunately, she's back. She's got a second chance. This time she's sent to her uncle back in Mumbai. She learns about the government loans and schemes. She takes up, a furniture business, manages money through one of the loans and starts an NGO where she's teaching other girls like her how to come up in life. Slowly her furniture business is being built up. She begs, borrows, does something and purchases the land. By now, her reputation has increased because of her flourishing NGO as well as her furniture business, and she starts real estate business also. During this time, there was a pioneering entrepreneur who had lost his business. He died with a great vision and leaving all his business to his sons who ended in disputes. Oh my God, think of the company. He had 3 companies, 3 firms. डूब रहा है, क्या करें? The court said, hand over the ownership to the workers. Imagine 3,000 workers as owners. Too many cooks spoil the broth, isn't it? And there are these 2 unions who are fighting, battling for supremacy. You know why? Because there was no boss there. Banks are also pouring in money. They have got money hugely from benefits also. But there's no one, no leader. What to do? They come to this upcoming businesswoman. And they say, this is the plight of a business, please help. And she said, yes. She hires consultants, she hires experts only for one reason. The thought that came to her mind was 566 starving families because of this business. And then she puts up a proposal to the board where the board says, sit on the board, take up all the responsibilities, take the liabilities. If you own your liabilities, then you're there. Finally, she does it. She does it with great might. She goes to court for 6 years. Finally, she approaches the finance minister. There are 140 crores of rupees incurred as loss or loans. Much more crores that they had to shell out as loans and interest, around 600 crores. Then the finance minister helps her out. 25% of the principal amount is brought down. The principal, the interest, everything is cut down. And the court gives her 7 years time to clear all her loans. Believe me, she did it in 1 year. 1 year. They said you have to give up all the wages to the workers within 1 year. She did it in 3 months. 3 months. That was Padma Shri Kalpana Saroj. Today, the CEO of Kamani Group of Companies. The company that she took over was Kamani Tubes from Ramanji Bai Kamani. Imagine what made her become an entrepreneur. She didn't have money. She was, dying. One day it was her sister who fell ill. And she was crying, Didi, say me, I don't want to die, I don't want to die, I don't want to die. That day she understood what money means. That made her an entrepreneur. Today she's a net worth of $112 crore million businesses. 6 businesses in her names. She's a Padma Shri. What a woman, what a woman. The harbinger of change is Kalpana Saroj. My personal inspiration was Kalpana Saroj, and today I'm standing here as the founder of Icha Learning Solutions. Apart from this, I'm also an entrepreneur. We have a business called Skanda Enterprises. Please see to my Facebook pages. I wouldn't talk much about it. And I'm also about to start one more, the 3rd company, Skanda Airtech, for which we are looking for investors. Hats off to Kalpana Saroj. And I bow down to all the women and the entrepreneurial spirit in them. I would love to leave you all with a quote of Kalpana Saroj herself. Ivy League degrees and fancy MBAs are not what makes an entrepreneur. Grit, determination, and a superhuman ability to have faith in yourself does. Thank you, one and all.